Welcome to the Life Support Simulator tutorial. Here we're going to take a quick look at how to use a simulator and at some of the things of which it's capable. When you open the application, you'll be presented with this menu screen that allows you to choose between several different modes. On this occasion, we're going to go for the CPR simulation because it's slightly less involved than some of the other scenarios we can run. When we click into that, we'll be presented with a brief clinical lead-in, and then the scenario will begin. It's worth noting at this point that we've turned the graphics quality down for the purposes of making the tutorial. When we were designing the software, we specifically wanted to make it accessible to any clinical staff who feel that they would get some benefit from it. We didn't want it to be limited to people who are familiar with modern applications. So we've opted for this very straightforward interface that consists of large, clearly labelled buttons, and perhaps belies somewhat the complexity of what's going on behind the software. As in a real-life clinical situation, once we've confirmed that the patient has no pulse and initiated CPR, we want to attach the defib pads and then perform a rhythm check. We'll receive a hint screen here that just lets us know that interaction with the defibrillator is a little bit different to the main screen, because we use these buttons directly to, for example, switch it on, change the energies, and so on. The software is capable of randomly generating rhythms, and it does so in real time. So here it's presented us with ventricular fibrillation. This is a shockable rhythm, so what we'll do, we'll check the energy is correct, hit the charge button, and deliver a shock. Before we skip to our next rhythm check, we'll establish some IV access, hook up some fluids, and we could now give some drugs. In fact, we could try and give some adrenaline because maybe we've got confused about which side of the CPR pathway we're going down. And here we've got feedback about what we did wrong and why we did it wrong. Behind the scenes, the software has noted that we made this mistake, and it will feed it back to us at the end of the scenario so we can get an idea of what areas we need to focus on during our self-directed learning. So we'll close the drawer, and now we'll skip to the next rhythm check. This is a broad, complex rhythm. It's not a tachycardia. In actual fact, it's probably third-degree heart block. But it's non-shockable. This is PEA. So on this occasion, we're going to resume CPR. Here we've been reminded to test ourselves on the 4H's and the 4T's between rhythm checks. I've noticed the fact that we decided not to include a quiz on the 4H's and 4T's. We've made lots of decisions like that where we've tried to streamline this software to make it to maximise the clinical impact, but minimise the software costs and the resources that were required for development. So there's just this little text prompting the user to do that. Let's skip to the next rhythm check. Here we've got a narrow complex tachycardia. It's probably an SVT. It's non-shockable. But let's say that we didn't know that. We're going to go ahead and charge up the defib and deliver another shock. And here, once again, we've got some real-time feedback about what we did wrong. And in actual fact, we'll be given the opportunity to be confronted with that same rhythm so that we can register our mistake and correct it this time. So we'll not shock that. And then we'll just whip through the rest of the rhythm checks. Another narrow complex tachycardia. VF again. And that's it, our patient's regained output. Here we get some feedback. So the time that we took to perform the rhythm checks was under the recommended 5 seconds, so we're being congratulated for that. However, we did shock that non-shockable rhythm. We also didn't give all the doses of adrenaline that we should have done, and we gave that initial dose of adrenaline despite the fact that we were on the shockable side of the algorithm. So the app's registered all those things and is now feeding it back to us. Let's reload the app and look at one of the other modes. maybe one of the more complicated ones. So here we'll go into our ABCDE simulation. We'll get a slightly more involved clinical lead-in on this occasion before the app begins. Now here it's the same interface, but clearly it's a lot more involved. What's going on behind the scenes on this occasion is that if John's airway is obstructed, which it is on this occasion because he's got vomit in the back of his throat, his oxygen saturations will be dropping fairly rapidly now. And if I sit here and talk for another couple of minutes or less, he'll go into cardiac arrest. Here we go. We'll be fed that back at the end of the scenario. Oh, and we can initiate the CPR here. And anyway, we'll be fed back at the end of the scenario the fact that the reason John arrested was because we hadn't managed the airway quickly. And you can imagine you don't have to go through that too many times to get the hang of the fact that as soon as the app opens, first thing you do, you check the airway, and then you manage it appropriately. So here we've opened the airway drawer, we'll suction out the vomit with the Yanker suction catheter, and then we'll bag John because we've been told he isn't breathing. Now that we've sorted out the airway, and it's assumed that we're delivering oxygen via this bag mask circuit, John will be becoming increasingly hypotensive because we haven't yet hung up fluids. If I sit here for maybe 3 or 4 minutes, he will once again arrest. And what we're trying to do here is train people, or rather reinforce a training that our users have already received in terms of getting them into the habit of the ABCDE approach and sticking rigidly to that order of things. The scenario I won't go through in any detail, you can explore this for yourself, but we can assess John over here. So he's got bibasal crepitations, which is probably under the circumstances pulmonary edema in light of the fact he's acutely unwell. He's already got oxygen being delivered here, so we don't need anything else from the breathing drawer. Or maybe we'll stick a SATS probe on here. If we close the drawer and we can look at the monitor, there you go, because he's being effectively bag valve mask ventilated, his oxygen saturations are up in the 90s now. And we can assess his circulation, we can hook up a 3-lead monitor, and there we are, he's got some sort of bradyarrhythmia, looks like it's probably AV dissociation, so a complete heart block. And we can manage John appropriately. There you go, because we didn't hook up the fluids, he's become hypotensive to the point where he's arrested. And once again, we have to go through the rigmarole of managing the cardiac arrest appropriately. And if we do so, we'll regain output and we can resume the scenario. At the end of the scenario, we'll be told that the reason he arrested was because we forgot fluids, so we can adjust our practice in the future. A couple of other modes down here. A lot of our candidates on ALS courses get really hung up on rhythm recognition. And rhythm recognition is one of those things where it's just a case of doing it again and again and again until you get the hang of it. It's experiential learning, which is very difficult to achieve via textbooks, but very easy to achieve with a simple setup like this. So they can just go through endless rhythms. So this is a normal sinus rhythm, albeit a very slow one. So we'll, oh no, he's dropped a beat there. So that's going to be what, Mobitz 2. And we can just go again and again and again. In the future, we'll introduce what's called gamification here, so that the user will get scores. They'll receive, virtual prizes for getting 10 rhythms in a row correct, that sort of thing. We'll also incorporate social media so that you can publish your scores and your performance on Facebook. You can do ABG practice, which is a very similar setup, and you can just go over this again and again and again until you're comfortable with it. And that's about it for the student side of things. So having seen the life support simulator in action, this is a companion app, which is a wireless remote control that can be used by instructors and life support teachers. Just like the simulator, it's cross-platform, so you can run it on your laptop, on your handheld device, or in fact on your smartphone because it's not too processor intensive. It will automatically detect any copies of the life support simulator that are running on the same wireless network. And what's quite neat is that if you have a modern smartphone, and almost all modern smartphones will do this, you can switch on 3G sharing and it will create a small wireless network. And the simulator and the remote control will connect over that. So you can really do this anytime, any place. So where I found it useful in the past is if you've got a small group, say 3 or 4 medical students or junior doctors, and you want to run a teaching session with them, but it's not going to be worth booking out a room and digging out all the resuscitation equipment like resusciani and all the paraphernalia. Nonetheless, you want to make this session interactive, hands-on, engaging. And so what you can do is just get out your laptop and boot up the life support simulator. Get your students installed in front of that and in control of the scenario. And meanwhile, you can sit off to one side, load this app on your tablet or smartphone, and you're in complete control of the patient that your students are looking at. So say they hook up some oxygen, you can put up the sats here, maybe drop the respiratory rate a little bit. If they hook up fluids, you can push the patient's blood pressure up. Or if they don't, you can put the patient into cardiac arrest and let them deal with that. Similarly, if you want to cover a scenario on bradyarrhythmias, you'll maybe put them into complete heart block, drop the rate, make sure it's unstable, and then allow your students to deal with this as they would in real life. And bear in mind, the simulator has that fully functional defib, so your students can try and administer atropine, to which you can make your patient respond if you like by putting the heart rate up. Or if that fails, they can go ahead and deliver external pacing to the patient in a really engaging and realistic way. So that's an overview of how the app works and some of the things of which it's capable. Our aim's been to develop a tool that allows clinical staff to consolidate and refresh the skills that they learned on their life support course. And we wanted to do this in a way that was affordable, accessible and practical, but without sacrificing that immersive, experience-centered approach that makes high-fidelity simulation so invaluable to resuscitation training. We hope you'll agree that we've done this, and if you do want to find out more, please visit our website at www.virtu-ALS.com. Thanks for watching.